All right, hello everyone. How's everyone doing out there? Welcome to my channel. We focus on educational material on this channel, primarily different theories of everything, comprehensively going over them, um, usually theories of everything that you've never heard of before or you know very little about. And today is the 232nd video on the reciprocal system of theory. That was originally put forward by Dewey B. Larson back in the 20th century. And he wrote a lot of articles and books and gave a lot of talks up until his death in 1990. Since then, the theory has been carried forward a little bit by Dr. Bruce Perret, Dr. KVK Nehru, Dr. Gopi Krishna. Those are probably the three people that I know most who have been forwarding the theory. There are some others as well. And, I'd love to discover more. But today we're looking at a paper that was written by Dr. Perret, who also passed away back in 2020. This is a paper called Geochronology, which is part one of his four-part anthropology series. And he wrote this under the pen name of Daniel Phoenix III. These are known as the Daniel Papers. And Daniel claims to have been a young computer programmer working on the Montauk project. So he had a lot of access to intel and black ops information. Don't know if that's really what Dr. Perret was doing during that time of his life, but he's fairly convincing. And just to let you know a little bit about the reciprocal system before we start is that in Larson's universe, we live in a universe of motion. Not a universe of matter, not a universe of energy, but a universe of motion. For Larson, motion was the relationship between space and time. Other people have had the notion that motion was the content of the universe, such as Descartes and Hobbes and Eddington. But Larson distinguished himself by redefining motion as the relationship between space and time. What this does is it sets up a generalized reciprocal relationship between space and time. Motion is basically a fraction where time or space is the numerator and space or time is the denominator. Think of the most basic kind of motion that we can come up with: speed. Speed is space over time. The car is moving 25 miles per hour. 25 miles of space in 1 hour of time. Now, say if you want to double the speed, you could say the car is now moving 50 miles per hour. Or you can say the car is now moving 25 miles per half hour. So both are saying the same thing. You can either multiply one by 2 or divide the other by 2. That is a reciprocal relationship. A reciprocal is basically a fraction that is inverted. So if you have the inverse of 1/3 is 3/1. The inverse of 1/4 is 4/1. The inverse of 2/3 is 3/2. You're just flipping the numerator and denominator. Okay, now it's a little more complicated than that in the case of space or time, because space or time have their coordinate aspects, meaning, and this is part of Larson's first postulate. He has two fundamental postulates that he drew up in the 1950s to sum up his theory. He basically takes these two postulates and he then says, well, if these are true, then this, then this. If this, then that. If this, then that. He deduces an entire theoretical universe from two basic postulates. And really, of those two postulates, only one of them is really terribly relevant. The other just has to do with math and geometry of the universe, and has been revised, in fact, by Dr. Perret to be a little bit more inclusive. But this first postulate is basically saying that space and time both have their coordinate aspects. They have three or more dimensions, x, y, z coordinates. We are accustomed to the idea of coordinate space, three or more dimensions of space. But there is also coordinate time, three or more dimensions of time. And then there is also what Larson calls the clock aspect, which is a scalar motion, which you would envision by taking a balloon and putting a bunch of dots on the balloon and then blowing up the balloon, or sucking in the balloon. All of the dots, if you're blowing it up, all the dots are moving away from each other, but in no particular direction. A scalar motion is a motion that has a magnitude but no direction. And this is how the clock works in Larson's system. The clock is always getting later and later and later. Time is always getting later and later and later. And so Larson calls that clock time. But there is also clock space. Everything that adheres to one, space or time, adheres to the other. And that everything in the universe is either one or the other, or a combination with a fraction. And that would be motion. Okay, so not only is there clock time, but there's also clock space. That is the idea that everything is always getting farther and farther and farther apart. And that is what you would use that balloon with the magic markers for. That is a model of everything moving farther and farther apart. That is what you would also think of as anti-gravity motion. Whereas if you sucked in the balloon, that would be a gravitational type motion. And then there's also the discrete unit postulate. Time and space only come in discrete units. There is no continuity of space or time. They only come in chunks. There is a minimum unit of space and a minimum unit of time. And if you have 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time, space over time, again, that is speed. If you have 1 unit of space over 1 unit of time, you have the speed of light. So the speed of light is 1. Larson refers to this as unit speed, and it represents a boundary between two separate sectors of the universe. The material sector, which we're familiar with, is the sector where everything is moving slower than the speed of light. The cosmic sector, termed by Larson, the cosmic sector is the sector that everything is moving faster than the speed of light, that the legacy scientists have very, very little notion about. And they evidenced by the fact that Einstein declared that nothing moves faster than the speed of light. Well, Larson's saying that there's a whole half of the universe that's moving faster than the speed of light. And even though we know nothing about it, we can determine things about it but simply by what we know about the material universe because of the reciprocal postulate. Um, what's going on in the cosmic universe is exactly the same as what's going on in the material universe, except that the roles of space and time are reversed. You just flip the fraction over. So in the material sector, you have coordinate space and clock time. In the cosmic sector, you have coordinate time and clock space. Okay, and then so there's really three boundaries in this universe. There's the boundary of the speed of light, that's called unit speed, and then there is a unit space boundary, everything that's less than a unit of space. Because again, when you have less than 1 unit of space, you don't have space. You only have time. Larson refers to this as the time region. That is a subsector of the material sector. So there's the time region inside of the material sector, and in the same way, when you have less than a unit of time, you don't have time, you only have space. So in the cosmic sector, you also have a subregion that is called the space region. And the time region and the space region are basically areas of action where atomic atomic physics goes on. The matters of the atom and molecules are going on inside of this unit of space or time. The unit of space is approximately, I think it's like 1/500,000th of an inch, and it's 4.56 times 10 to the minus 8 meters. And then the unit of time is the incredibly small 1.52 times 10 to the minus 16 seconds. That means that 6.6 times 10 to the 15 seconds units of time per second. So that means that every second that goes by, a million billion of the 6 million billion of these units go by. Okay, we're gonna just now get into reading for 10 minutes or so about Perret. Now, he was talking about the dating of the three events, the three, which he referred to as the three destructions of Atlantis, first, second, and third, and he correlated the first destruction of Atlantis with the creation of Adam and Eve, and the Mayan creation of the world, and then the second destruction of Atlantis, he's corresponding that with the biblical flood and the Mayan flood. And then the third destruction of Atlantis is the Hebrew Exodus. And he dates these with the very, very short period dating of 3761 BC for the creation, 2105 BC for the flood, and 1548 BC for the Exodus. Now, these numbers are, I would say, impossibly small, except for the Exodus. The Exodus is actually later, I believe, than what he's saying it is. But anyway, we're going to go on to Perret reading more about this. The inference is obvious. Mankind was created by God or the gods, with a small g, around 3761 BC, which we are incorrectly dating as 50,000 BC. In Zechariah Sitchin's system, it's actually 450,000 BC. So it may be interesting to see what else may have been going on at 50,000 BC that might be of interest, and we find these types of early modern humans, Neanderthals, supposedly evolved into the next step toward actual humans. The Cro-Magnons living 50 to 60,000 years ago. With the corrected calendar, 50,000 BCE becomes 3761 BC, and the Cro-Magnons, us, showed up in the geological record at the same time as Adam and Eve and the Mayan creation of man, right after the first destruction of Atlantis, and missing a link to the Neanderthals that were previously overrunning the land, much to the annoyance of the Atlanteans. This is congruent with the biblical accounts of the creation of Adam and Eve being the first humans that God created on earth. First humans, yes, but not the first intelligent species to exist on earth. The Atlanteans were intelligent, just not human. So they predate the biblical accounts. Of course, it also begs the question of who is this God person anyway? Showing up in mythology all over the planet, creating humans. This will be the subject in another paper of this series, but based on my Montauk experiences, I can sum it up in 3 letters. SMs. The Saurians, known to the Sumerians as the Anunnaki, to the Christians as the Elohim, to the Norsemen as the Aesir, to the Indians as the Asura, and by many other names all over the globe. All right, and so we will eventually read that paper here as it's another paper in this series. Okay, this next section is called Planetary Moons. As previously mentioned, the early planets had no moons because all the fragments of the white dwarf destroyed in the supernova explosion would have predominant ultra-high speed motion, anti-gravity, and therefore would move away from each other. The outer planets would experience nova-like explosions over the course of their cooling down, ejecting both planetary rings and many smaller moons. But what of the inner planets? Mercury and Venus have no moons. Earth has an exceptionally large one for the size of the planet, and Mars has a couple of very small moons that don't behave properly, orbiting in the wrong direction and faster than the planetary rotation. Immanuel Velikovsky had some interesting perspectives with his rogue planet theories, but the difficulty with them is that planets containing white dwarf cores are subject to the properties thereof, and subject to the properties thereof, are not able to leave their orbital positions and go wandering about the solar system. Even the moon-sized ejecta from the outer planets would be unlikely to get past the neutral zone of the asteroid belt to reach the inner worlds. Asteroids and comets containing no intermediate or ultra-high-speed matter operate solely on gravitational principles and can drift all over the solar system, but because they lack those very motions, they can never form a stable orbit around a planet. The moons of Earth and Mars have no apparent natural origin. In the book called The Case for the UFO, Jessup, I think Morris Jessup, writes, Dean Swift was prescient in regard to his astronomy, predicting that Mars had 2 small satellites, one of which was close to Mars's surface and made 2 revolutions daily. It has been pointed out that this inner body is too close to Mars to be in adjustment with any known postulate of the natural distribution of satellites relative to their parent body. This may be an indication that Mars's inner satellite is artificial. In the Vero annotations of the book, it is noted that the Martian moons are also an old dead arc, SM make. Okay, now this next section is, I guess it's a Bill Cosby quote here. Noah, I want you to build an ark. An ark? Right. What's an ark? We'll just read the first paragraph here. An ark is a term used by both LMs and SMs, that's little men and saurian men, to refer to the large interplanetary motherships that they use as colonies and transportation between solar systems. They are constructed from asteroids that have intermediate speed motion, small planetary cores, and therefore an inverse density gradient to their structure, with all the heavy, hard metals on the outside providing protection from the ravages of space, and a soft, chewy center. He's making a mockery of the Tootsie Roll there, of lighter elements and atmospheric gases at the core. They are essentially a prefab spaceship ready for interstellar travel, being a smaller application of a Dyson shell. All that is required is a navigation system to orient the scalar magnetic field already present from the intermediate speed motion into either paramagnetic attractive or diamagnetic repulsive modes. Okay, we're going to stop it right there and take over then tomorrow with some more on the moons as arcs, arcs as traveling vehicles. Okay, artificial traveling vehicles. All right, thanks for tuning in. I hope to see you tomorrow. Have a great day.